two players elected first-team All-NBA in the same season?
See, the trick is two players in first team. So initially you think about super teams. So you would think that it might be Steph and KD, except they weren't first team. You would think that it would be LeBron and Wade, but Wade wasn't first team. I'm going against, I was going to say Mike and Scotty because I played against them, but somebody came after them called Shaq and Kobe.
Shaq and Kobe is incorrect.
Steve Nash and Amari. You ready for this, Greeny? You ready for this? Yeah. I was on that team. Can't make this up. I was on that team. Yes. And let you know how much I wasn't playing. No wonder why they wasn't playing me.
Because you were in Phoenix. Absolutely unbelievable. I don't even know what to say. That's about as good as we could possibly have hoped for.
I was on that team.
Okay, let us go back to what can only be described as the insanity of this day. So at 1:30 Eastern Time, that private plane landed in Toronto, and a man who may or may not have been Kawhi Leonard got into one of those two SUVs, which were then followed by choppers, which is why we have all of these pictures, into downtown Toronto, where those people got out of that car, went into a building. That is what we know for certain. Everything else is kind of murky. Let's try and fill in some of the details if we can by bringing Brian Windhorst into the conversation fresh off the jump this afternoon and a whole lot more. Windy, you've seen all of this. Obviously, it's getting crazy in Toronto. What are you hearing? What is your sense of what's going on?
So this is dangerous to say, but I'm starting to get my arms around what I think Kawhi is looking at here. So one of the really most important pieces of information from the last week was that before Kevin Durant committed to going to the Brooklyn Nets, that Kawhi talked to him about teaming up this summer. And that place could only have been on the Clippers. I mean, I guess in theory, the Raptors could have traded a bunch of people, but I don't think Durant would have gone there. So I think what he wants from the Clippers, or if he goes to the Clippers, I think he's interested in possibly them finding another star player to play with him. And the Clippers can do that. Because they have a lot of assets. But it's who that star would be, I don't know who it would be. I mean, Bradley Beal has sort of had people, they've been slamming the door shut on offers. And so I feel like he knows what the Lakers are to a certain extent. He knows kind of what the Clippers have, but he's not really sure what they are. And then he has his tremendous fallback position, which is to stay with the Raptors. And that is kind of the way it's sort of lining up. The Raptors have set it up so that they could bring their whole team back. They still have Danny Green's bird rights. They could bring it back. And even if he signs a one-year contract, it really sets up for them because their entire team essentially would be on a one-year contract. And he could give the Clippers and Lakers time to get on their feet and maybe have a better idea of where they're going to be maybe in a year in free agency. So I think, I don't know what he's going to do, but I kind of can see sort of how he might be working now.
And this is very consistent with what Jalen was saying earlier, that he was interested in the Clippers, but they didn't have the firepower, to use Jalen's words, that he was looking for, and thus
they may
back
not have
to Toronto.
It yet, but like my ear is going to be to the ground, and Zach too, I'm sure, to see if the Clippers all of a sudden start to do any discussions about canvassing the league for stars. I haven't heard that yet, but I wonder if that's something that is an option for them. As they look at this situation.
And so no sense of a timetable here, right? You do not have any sense that we are... I feel there are some people who seem to think we're getting very close to an announcement here. Do you have that sense at all?
Well, there's been this vacuum of information since we've now believed that we've seen Kawhi go to Toronto. I think there's a belief that it's a quickening, but since we don't know his exact plans, we really can't assume that. I think at this point, if indeed it is Kawhi, and I'm fairly certain that that's what it is, but if indeed it is Kawhi, this could just be a box to check off on his process. I mean, he could get right back in that plane and come right back here to LA in a couple of hours, and we'd still be, just guessing. So I don't think that you should take the fact that he went to Toronto to mean anything. However, I do think it's a good sign for the Raptors.
All right, the other thing I wanted to ask you about today, and you mentioned you're in Los Angeles and you have been on this show to talk about the Lakers so many times in the last few months. Yesterday, Woj reported that Jared Dudley had a one-year, $2.6 million contract with the Lakers. And then Jared Dudley went on Woj's podcast and said the deal wasn't done until LeBron gave his approval. And it wasn't quite clear. We played it on our morning show today if he was joking around or not. But it did beg the question, and that's what I wanted to ask to you. Is LeBron actually right now making most of the decisions for a Laker team that has been through so much upheaval over the course of the last 6 weeks or so?
Well, it was my understanding that Jared Dudley had an offer from the Detroit Pistons. In fact, the Pistons moved on today and signed Markieff Morris. And he really wanted to play for the Lakers and was sort of having difficulty getting the Lakers to commit because the Lakers really can't commit to anything right now. And I do think he reached out to LeBron to help that commitment move forward. And this is what I've tried to explain over the years. It is not a black and white, green and red situation with LeBron when it comes to personnel moves. He doesn't decide on all of them. He doesn't say, get this guy, fire that guy, cut this guy, whatever. But he very rarely is there a move that happens that he doesn't discuss with the organization. So if you're trying to get LeBron's team to commit to you, speaking to LeBron is a way to help that process along. And I know that sounds muddled and in gray area, and that's because that's the way it is. In fairness to David Griffin, LeBron didn't put that team together, but he was a big part of why they put that championship team together, and I think the same is happening with the Lakers.
That's really well done. Wendy, we will come back to you as soon as events warrant. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes here. Good to see you as always. Let me take it to the table, and I'm going to change the plan here. I think we should go back to what he was just saying about Kawhi, if we can here, guys, because I think that is important, and it is completely consistent with what you, Jalen, said at the beginning. And Jalen right now is blowing up on Twitter and everything else with your belief and the people you've talked to that you were 90% certain that Toronto is the destination, and that part of the reason is that the Clippers did not have the kind of firepower that he wanted to play with. That may have been his desire all along. We've been hearing he wanted to go to the Clippers for a very long time now. And Zach, Wendy was making the point, and you will have your ear to the ground as well. Who is it out there the Clippers could try and find a way to bring in to team with Kawhi?
Yeah, it's a little late in the game for that, and I think that one of the maybe underrated events was Jimmy Butler going off the board relatively early, because that was a name that had also been mentioned as a possible Clippers partner. And once Miami went and grabbed him, then Beal comes to mind. I mean, I'll have to look and see who else comes to mind, but there really aren't that many guys who you right now you could say, let's go get them, and it's going to move the needle.
From a free agency standpoint, obviously, there's almost none of that. So now you're talking about trying to make a deal.
Yeah. And they have a lot of stuff. They just got another pick from the Heat, and they were part of the Jimmy Butler.
Or to the point I think Wendy was making there, and that you sign a short-term deal in Toronto. You get what you get there. You run it back with this group and try and win another championship. And the Clippers don't go away. They're still there, and you give it time to see if there could be another star you can team up with down the road.
And you're only in your 10th year potentially when the deal happens, and then you're eligible for that super max. And you keep bringing this up, and I want to make sure I make the point. Players nowadays can take shorter deals because your career has been elongated. The game isn't as physical. You don't play as many back-to-backs. The medicine is better. So if you're an elite-level player, you see them taking less years. LeBron, KD, Kawhi could do the exact same thing. Look at a player like Al Horford. Okay, he's in his mid-40s. He's got a 4-year deal. I mean, mid-30s.
I like it better that way, Jay.
No, you're right. He's in his mid-40s, sir. He's
Right.
Think about this. He's in his mid-30s, and we're validating him getting the deal, not because only he's a terrific basketball player, but so he can play quality minutes for a guy that's 10 years younger than him.
Right.
Just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
So when you have that dynamic in today's game, this was what makes sense, in my opinion, for Kawhi Leonard.
I get it. And the risk of injury is relative, because a player of his stature, so long as it's not an injury that will end his career. We saw Kevin Durant get hurt and still get all of the money quickly. What is your sense of this, Farnham?
It's exactly what we talked about this morning. And he knew what he saw in L.A. He knew what the pieces were there. He knew the lack of depth that they had there. He knew what he had in Toronto. The only wait and see was whether or not the Clippers were going to add somebody. And when the Clippers were unable to add somebody, it does make sense to go to a place, but by the way, where you're a champion, you're the MVP, you're in the Eastern Conference, you know exactly what you have to do in order to get back to the finals and try to do it again.
Pure speculation, not reporting. It seems inevitable that Kevin Love is going to get traded from Cleveland at one point. Maybe that's a place where if the Clippers are scrambling last minute, they look.
All right. It'd be very interesting to watch. Again, keep your eyes and ears on all of this. We're waiting for Woj and a whole lot more as we go. Also, a reminder, we got baseball coming your way. Fresh off a 2-game sweep sweep of the Red Sox in London. The Yankees' consecutive home run streak is at 31 games, and they look to make it 32 against the Crosstown Mets tonight at Citi Field. 7 Eastern on ESPN and the ESPN app. All right, coming up, among other things, much more on LeBron James, much more on Kawhi Leonard. Call me an idiot, but I think I know who the MVP is going to be. All that and a whole lot more. You're watching Get Up, an afternoon special on ESPN.